Does anyone listening think that people who are on the sex offenders registry for crimes against children should be allowed to mingle with other offenders outside of prison? And I'm not talking about a therapy setting. I mean, they're buddies and they do things together. Because I don't. I don't think it's healthy. But South Carolina doesn't care. And you know what else they don't care about? How long an offender stays somewhere they don't live, as long as it's still in South Carolina. The offender only has to let the local police know that they're in town, and then they can stay as long as they like. And does it matter if the offender is staying right next to a school or a playground? Nope. South Carolina says go ahead, be around children. It's not like you're on the sex offenders registry for an assault against children, except, oopsie doodle, the person I called slut about actually is on the registry for crimes against children. And that's who we're going to talk about in this episode. Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and hold on to your hats, my lovelies, because we have a lot to talk about. My favorite idiot, Reginald Wayne Miller's buddy, Robert Troy Taylor, who goes by Troy, has been doing some talking. Except he didn't know who he was talking to. Whoopsie. For those of you who have no idea who Troy is, I've discussed him and Reggie in videos I've made in the Micah Francis case. Reggie and Troy met when Troy was in prison and Wayne had a prison ministry. I'd like to say it was love at first sight, but it wasn't. From what I've heard, Troy didn't like Wayne. But I guess Wayne, with his never-ending charm, won Troy over, and they've been friends ever since. Now, as long as I don't see anything shiny after I post this, I'll put some links up for those episodes in the description box. But as a quick refresher on Troy Taylor, he was convicted in Georgetown County, South Carolina in 2006 on charges of criminal sexual conduct with minors and committing or attempting lewd acts on a minor. In 2007, he was found guilty in Williamsburg County, South Carolina, for criminal sexual conduct with minors and kidnapping, and sentenced to life in prison. In 2019, that sentence was vacated and Troy was released on bond. Now, the sentence was vacated because Troy's attorney was an idiot. And at the time, the prosecuting attorney said he was ready for another trial, but 7 years later, here we are. However, Troy is still smiling for the camera in his pic on the sex offenders registry because that's something to smile about. Anywho, Troy Taylor has been seen hanging out in Pickens, South Carolina, and I only know this because someone dropped me an email to tell me about it. It seems that Troy has a new girlfriend, and I'm not going to mention her name because even though she has tried her best to prove otherwise, I still think she's more naive than evil, or at least I hope she is. So let's call her Pollyanna. And I decided to message Pollyanna using one of my backup accounts, a mysterious woman named Louise Bernhardt from Kingston, Massachusetts, who now has to digitally die. So long, Louise, you crazy bitch. Now, I'm not really sure why I'm trying to protect Pollyanna's identity. Maybe I'm waiting to see if she'll realize that Troy Taylor is not all that in a bag of chips, but rather none of that and a Dollar General bag of room temperature dookie. And I worry about any woman who has a young daughter such as Pollyanna does, and who works with children like Pollyanna does, who would even consider dating someone who's on the sex offenders registry for crimes against children. I mean, there are red flags, and then there are entire freight trains hauling nothing but red flags. And I think being on the offenders registry is the latter. Now, when I was footloose and fancy free and still in the dating world, I would have never even slightly considered dating anyone if I found they were on the registry for crimes against children. And especially when I could so easily look at the news archives and see that the person admitted they assaulted children. I mean, there is no man worth that, and especially not one who always looks like he consistently smells like stale French fry grease. Troy is telling people that he proved his innocence, and that's how he got out of his life sentence, but that's not true. What is true is that his life sentence was vacated on the grounds that his attorney, Charles Barr, failed to provide a constitutionally adequate defense. He never proved his innocence. If he had, the charges would have been dismissed, but they weren't. he was still under arrest for the charges and was let out on bond. And sometime after that, the prosecuting attorney decided to not retry the charges for whatever reason. Maybe the survivors didn't want to have to go through another trial. But again, that doesn't prove that Troy is innocent. And I'll have a separate episode where we cover this and his other attempt and failure to have his first case dismissed. But back to the messages between Pollyanna and me. When I first started writing Pollyanna, I thought she was the one answering me. But it didn't take long before I began to realize it was Troy writing me. And now that I've looked back at the messages, I think he was doing the majority of the writing. Either way, Pollyanna seems to be convinced that Troy is innocent. And she is convinced that at least 5 people that I know of are lying about being abused by Troy when they were minors. And she is convinced that Troy was lying when he admitted under oath that he had done what he was accused of during his 2006 trial. And I suppose that after Troy admitted under oath that he'd been abused by his grandfather, his family was lying when they said that that abuse contributed to Troy's behavior. So even though it seems like his own family believed he'd abused young boys, Pollyanna doesn't. And she's okay with Troy marrying a 20-year-old when he was 56, and a 20-year-old who was in an extremely vulnerable and abusive place. A 20-year-old who thought Troy was going to be her way out of that abusive situation, but then learned that he wasn't. Thankfully, she had a brother who rescued her from Troy, and she's doing much better now. And Pollyanna is okay that Troy spent over a year on a TikTok account he made under a name that wasn't his, expressly to post messages to that 20-year-old, telling her how she would never find another man who loved her as much as he did. And even though she had blocked him on all of her social media, as well as any other means of him contacting her, and made it clear that she was through with him, Troy didn't give 2 figs. He still made video after video directed at her. His princess, his angel, and all the other gag-inducing nicknames he gave her. And it's funny that since all of this has boiled forth in the past week, Troy has now deleted that particular TikTok account. Which is weird, isn't it? On March 26th of this year, he was still making videos to his ex-wife Princess, but once Pollyanna was told about them, whoosh, they were gone. It's a good thing I saved some of them, huh? So do you want to know how the conversation went between Pollyanna, Troy, and me? Well, I thought you would, so here we go. I started by emailing with, "You don't know me, but I was told you were dating Troy Taylor. Are you aware that he's on the sex offenders registry for abusing a child? He admitted to it in court as well. He's also been posting on a TikTok account under the name Joshua Caleb. Almost all of the videos are him talking to his ex-wife, and they're very manipulative. She has blocked him on all of her accounts, and he still won't leave her alone. He's not a safe person. Please don't let him around children." Now, let me insert here that I should have never referred to her as his ex-wife, since the marriage was annulled. So it's as if the marriage never existed, which it shouldn't have. And let me also say that I have never talked to his ex, ever. But as you'll see in these messages, Troy thought that maybe I was her, because he still seems to be obsessed with her or something. It's not healthy and it's creepy. Pollyanna Troy answered, "Oh my word, what? How do you know these things are true? I knew he was married about 20 years ago, so you saying he's still contacting her? I don't have TikTok, so I can't access the link you sent. Like, my mind is blown right now." And so I answered, "This isn't the wife he had then. This was a girl that he married when she was 20 years old last January. She'd been in a horrible situation and was very vulnerable. Her brothers came and got her away from Troy. Their marriage was annulled in July. Here are some screenshots that show he had made another video for her a little over a week ago, and another that shows where their annulment was filed in Horry County." And Pollyanna Troy replied, "I'm so confused. He was with me last Thursday. Are you this girl's mom, aunt? If she's blocked him on all her accounts, how did she know he sent her a video? And how did you get it? The sled information says Robert, plus there isn't a picture with it. None of this makes any sense to me. I mean, if it's true, I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. I'm just having trouble even processing this. I'm sorry. There's so much information to digest. Would you be willing to talk on the phone with me? I just don't know what to do, how you got my name, or how you're connected to the situation, but you seem like a very contentious person, and I'm not sure who else to trust." And that is when I began to get suspicious, because that's what I do. But I continued. I didn't notice that his pic wasn't on the sled registry. Here it is with his photo, as well as the registry from Horry County. It has a larger photo of him. His full name is Robert Troy Taylor, and I'm not anyone directly connected to Troy, but I've talked to people who are. Someone gave me the information about you dating Troy, and they are worried about you and your daughter. I don't mean to be so mysterious about it. I just wanted you to be warned about him. And if he's still hanging around West McCoy, he's on the registry for crimes against minors, too. And Pollyanna Troy answered, "Thank you so much, Louise. I will definitely check all of it out if I can figure out how to navigate all around these websites. Ugh. I am concerned that someone who knows me didn't feel comfortable enough to come to me personally and share these legitimate concerns with me, but felt the need to have a stranger contact me about such a serious matter. I'm very approachable and reasonable, and any friend of mine would know that, but regardless, I'm grateful for the information. What degree of connection, if not directly, do you have to him? Are you an advocate or counselor? I'm just curious. Did you grow up or live in South Carolina or Myrtle Beach at one time? To be honest, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how a person from Massachusetts would be so informed about him and his friend you mentioned. And here I've redacted some personal information that Troy shouldn't have been telling me, but it's hard for me to trust anyone, and all of this is so mind-bending and triggering. I'd really like to speak with you so I can gain some perspective and clarity. If you'd prefer to tell me who gave you the information so I can contact them, and first of all make sure they know, I definitely not be upset with them for showing concern for me and my daughter, and secondly, to find out if there is anything else I need to know that they haven't personally shared with you. Again, how do you know this person? That will help ease my uncertainty and doubt that this is all some sick joke someone is trying to pull on me. I keep rereading through our conversation and I'm trying to make sense of everything. I do want to clear up a remark I made but used the wrong adjective. Before your last message, I wrote you seem like a contentious person, which wasn't accurate. I meant to say conscientious, as in thoughtful and mindful of others, caring. Well, that's not what conscientious means. And then in your last message, you said you have talked to people, indicating more than one person who knew him and have direct contact with him. Does that mean in the past or current? Family members of his, friends, church friends? Are you affiliated with an organization or nonprofit that works with women, such as his ex-wife, redacted, per the screenshots you sent me indicates? Do you know her, work with her, counsel her, related to her, or? I keep mulling around in my mind how you would know so many details about the situation, his friend, how she got away, etc. Was it Troy that put her in the horrible situation? I'm absolutely not saying I don't believe you, but I've been through a lot, as has my daughter, and it would be extremely reassuring to hear why you were so invested in investigating these specific situations and sharing it all with me. Ugh. What a manipulator. And like this doesn't sound exactly like everything Troy would say. I mean, I can hear everything in his stupid voice. And he was just digging, trying to figure out who I was and how I got this information. Well, people don't trust you, Troy, so they give me information. They think you're a danger to society, so they give me information. There are a lot of people who think you should still be serving a life sentence, so they give me information. And not to be all slaggy braggy, but I'm pretty good at digging up information on my own. So then I replied, I've received information that you've known about Troy. Since you felt it necessary to lie to me, I'm finished talking to you. Oh, but Pollyanna Troy wasn't finished talking to me. Oh, no, gentle listener. Polly Troy had much more to say, like this. Well, I've received information that this is a fake account, and Louise Bernhardt from Kingston, Massachusetts doesn't exist. In fact, the picture you used is actually Deborah, who lives in South Carolina. You can figure out where and her last name, since you're so brilliant, but I've already contacted her and told her about you making a fake account with her picture. Thankfully, Troy is staying with the Chief of Police, Chief Beach, if you want to check into the truth, and has done so in the past, just for this very reason, and will let him know of this conversation and this fake account. And before you move on to your next victim, disguised as a concern for a stranger and her daughter's citizen, you might want to check your facts because they aren't all correct. But I'm not surprised since you felt it necessary to disguise your identity, be deceitful, and lie to me. I'm finished talking to you. But Pollyanna Troy was still not finished talking to me. And about 30 minutes later, he wrote, You're right on one thing. I have known about Troy, and I've done my due diligence and continue to do so. In fact, I know his case was overturned due to the incompetency of the lawyer and a whole lot of other details you wouldn't know about. after he hired a competent defense lawyer that actually did his job, which overturned the case. And I have all the court paperwork and documents in hand. So now I'm done talking to you, Louise the Deceiver Bernhardt. So you're really going to tell the chief of police in Pickens, South Carolina, that someone on Facebook is using a fake profile? I mean, do you think he's going to come and arrest me for it? And if there really is some woman named Deborah in South Carolina using that same photo, it's not her either because it was a stock photo. And Troy's case, again, was not overturned. His life sentence was vacated. So 2 days later, I answered Pollyanna Troy. He had 2 cases. One was dismissed, but the first charge wasn't. It was from Georgetown, and it's the reason he's still on the offender's registry. Do you honestly think he'd still be on the registry if all the charges were dropped against him? The only thing him living with the chief of police makes me think is that the chief might be as questionable as Troy. I know you want to believe I'm making this up, but I have no reason to make it up. Like I've said, I have no connection to Troy, but I also don't want him to destroy any more lives. But Pollyanna Troy persisted. I know the first charge wasn't dismissed. He had already served out his term plus some, so when he was released from Perry, he had to wear an ankle bracelet for a month, but did for a year just to be safe. He had 0 probation, even though they wrote pronation, and no restrictions, which were once again confirmed by the SRO 2 days ago when we went to meet the county officers he contacted before coming into town to inform them of his whereabouts. His lawyer continued to prepare him for the state to retry his case, but 2 years after his release, his lawyer called and informed him the state decided not to retry his case. Yes, he's on the registry because of his first case, and without it being retried and overturned, getting off the registry at this point is extremely difficult, as it should be. He's trying, but the process and probability is 1 degree away from impossible. However, he was looking forward to the state retrying his case because his lawyer had more evidence proving his innocence, which I also have in hand, than they had for the second case. Furthermore, if the state had retried the first case and lost, then he would be completely exonerated, off the registry, and could sue the state of South Carolina to financially recoup all the days he spent in prison plus some, for all the pain and suffering and having his life destroyed by the false allegations. The state would obviously know that and decided to not risk their own reputation. Make sense? No, Pollyanna Troy, it doesn't make sense. If the state had retried your first case, well, they weren't ever going to do that. You never appealed it. I mean, yeah, if you'd been found innocent, you wouldn't be on the registry, but you admitted to it and you pleaded guilty. I can say that if I weighed a lot less, was a lot prettier and younger, I could be a supermodel, but that's not happening either, you ginormous putz. Stop trying to gaslight someone by saying that the state didn't want to risk their reputation, so they didn't retry you. That is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But now I understand why you and Reggie are buddies. So for those of you who want to know the truth and not this BS story that Troy's telling, I'll have an episode that covers his cases. And we'll talk about the 2 times he filed for post-conviction relief for his first case and took it to the South Carolina Supreme Court both times and had it denied both times. But Pollyanna Troy had more to say. I absolutely don't think you're making this up, especially since I researched it for myself 7 months ago. I looked up, read, and reread all the court documents, watched documentaries, read online newspaper articles, researched the lawyers he used, asked him any question I had without him ever getting upset or dismissing the content of the question, while always answering it in detail. Traced down any bits of information, no matter how small, if I felt I needed more clarification or verification. I read reviews and researched the psychologists that practiced hypnosis and recalling repressed memories, treating his cousin, who, by the way, was literally just arrested on Sunday for possession of child pornography and what appears to be mind control on how to abuse nonverbal individuals and get them to obey your commands. I'll include the article for your information should you be interested in anything other than trying to discredit and destroy Troy's as he tries to rebuild his life. So even though Pollyanna Troy kind of made it sound like his cousin was the one who was just arrested, it wasn't. It was Dr. Robert McCarthy. And what Polly Troy is doing here is trying to make people believe that the only reason his cousin testified against him in court was because he'd been hypnotized by Dr. Robert McCarthy. So what about the other 2 boys who also testified? And why would Dr. McCarthy hypnotize anyone to testify against Troy? It just doesn't make sense. Stop blaming your victims, you infected piece of phlegm. But Pollyanna Troy continued. Do you honestly think I would put myself and specifically my child in danger without doing my research? I understand statistically a lot of people do, but either you don't know me, plausible, or perhaps you live close to me, know me and my story, but decided I was either incompetent, blinded, or untrustworthy, despite my track record and all the hundreds of hours I've invested into education on abuse, court systems, childhood trauma, abuser typologies, coercive control, systems of abuse, recognizing patterns of abuse, intimate partner abuse, red flags of abusers, effects of trauma, PTSD, CPTSD, effects of domestic abuse on the children, intimate partner sexual violence laws of South Carolina, etc. Well, how many men have tried to convince a woman that while they might be a statistic, I'm a different kind of statistic, baby. I'm not like those other men on the offenders registry. And Pollyanna Troy continued, as for Chief Beach, either you truly don't know him, indicating you're not from around here, or you're allowing sheer fear to be your logic and guide. But to be clear, Troy isn't living with him. He's staying at his house when he comes to town. So let me clarify that since I wrote that I wondered about Chief Beach, if he's letting Troy stay there, I've learned that the chief and his wife rent out a room in their house on Airbnb. Now, it's so odd to me that Troy would choose to stay there, though. It kind of sounds like maybe he's staying there as if to say, if I was a bad guy, would I actually stay at a cop's house? Yes, you dolt. Polly Troy continued. Feel free to drive down from Massachusetts for a face to face chat. Or if you're in closer proximity, as in living in my town, come on over for coffee and conversation. Or if you live on my street, walk on over and we'll chat. But perhaps stop being a coward and reveal who you are. Hiding behind a keyboard and apologizing for being mysterious subtracts from your credibility and self proclaimed intentions. But I get it. If you live near me, you're likely dealing with fear. Or if you live in Myrtle Beach and happen to be related to him, like say maybe a sister that interfered in the whole ex-wife thing, and thinks you're doing the world a favor, maybe stop relying on the demonic forces of psychics, calling up the dead and all that nonsense. And I don't say nonsense as in believing it's not real. I say nonsense as in it's a power beyond what any human can handle, as the evil one is out to kill, rob, and destroy all that he can, as he's the father of lies and prince of darkness. Messing with that is just opening yourself and your children up to things beyond what you can even control or imagine. Or maybe not. Perhaps you are quite familiar with the occult and SRA. I think by SRA he means satanic ritual abuse. At any rate, I'm well informed, far beyond what you might think. I know about Troy's ice cream truck. That ex only has one brother, not brothers. That she was in a horrible situation, but she bears some culpability in all the mess, as she was extremely deceptive and manipulative towards not only Troy, but redacted church as she worked on staff, yet lived a double life. It's not for me to convince you otherwise, so I won't get into those specifics, but maybe have a conversation with your brother, should you happen to be a sister, to get a clearer picture of the whole situation. If not, your choice, but you could consider putting as much energy into figuring out why you have engaged in multiple relationships other than your spouse. I know about Troy's grandfather's sexual abuse involving his own children, then moving on to specific grandchildren. So Pollyanna Troy is just rambling on and on about his sister and his ex, and again telling me all kinds of things I didn't know and don't need to know. But it seems as though Troy has no filter and is only looking out to try and clear himself without thinking of the consequences his mouthiness could have for other people. And he's also just all over the map trying to figure out who I am. If you're in Myrtle Beach, if you're in my town, if you're in my neighborhood, if you're hiding under my bed. And he continued. If you live in Myrtle Beach, I'll be in town in May with several of my family members who all know Troy's story and have met him, and then back again in June if you're interested in meeting me. One last thing that speaks volumes to me. Troy has been nothing but consistent with his facts, honorable with his language and behavior, respectful of me and all my family, open, authentic, cautious, and careful to the extreme, and only kind when I initially expressed there was no way we could ever be anything more than friends because of his circumstances. He was completely understandable, thankful for my willingness to consider being friends, and generous with his time. His account of details continues to check out as reliable. Time will heal or time will reveal, and up to this point, through daily prayer and scripture reading being illuminated by the power of the Holy Spirit, time has revealed his sincerity and honesty. It is just wild to me that Troy's trying to gaslight me. He's been so honorable with his language. What does that even mean? That the first time they met, he didn't say, hey, sweet tits, sugar biscuit? And the gaslighting he's doing here is exactly what he did in the videos he made for his ex. Time will heal or time will reveal. Well, time and the courts have already told us all we need to know about you, trash man. And then 2 hours after he wrote that message, he wrote, "Oh my word, I see you typing. I thought you were done talking to me." Well, what a freak. That means that Pollyanna Troy was sitting there watching the conversation to see if I'd answer. And I didn't answer, but Troy didn't care. Because Troy can talk, talk, talk. If this isn't my neighbor or Troy's younger sister, my next guess is Redacted, X, or someone who's associated with her in order to supply her information. But I have little doubt that whoever is behind Louise is the one calling churches where Troy goes to sing, is behind emailing Wes's church, etc., all in the name of concern for everyone else's safety. Noble as though it sounds, my guess is it's done with the intent to hurt Troy, instead of actually being concerned for the strangers you contact. Your intentions are highly suspect, but that's between you and God as he looks on the heart. How do you have that much time or mental space to keep playing games with Troy's life? Try to get some help for your insatiable desire to follow his every move. Ugh. Nobody's following your every move, you freak. And I don't know who's been calling the churches, but I mean, good for them. People should be warned. In fact, I'd be okay with anyone who's on the sex registry for assaulting children or for a violent crime to have to walk around with a tag that reads, "Hello, my name is so and so. I'm a registered sex offender." And it seems as though Troy is definitely obsessed with the ex because he thinks someone is doing this to supply her with information. I'm not going to share part of the next bit of the conversation because Troy is revealing entirely too much about his ex that he shouldn't be telling some complete stranger on the internet. So, the first part that I've redacted is when he's talking as though I'm the ex and talking about how they got together. Redacted. Then move in with him and beg him to marry you for 2.5 years before showing up to church on that Monday. Asked to speak to Troy in private, and while he was kind enough to leave the group of people he was with, so you could confide in him about your horrible situation and beg him to marry you, then you left him the day after you all got married with your combined 40,000 and his 3,700. You took everything, or your mom did, so you claim. Funny how he didn't end up with any of your money you banked from working at the church, but not having to pay for anything because of your secret boyfriend supported you and paid for everything. A qualified therapist may help you process through all the trauma you've endured so you can experience healing, move on with life, and focus on becoming famous with your country music singing career. And that's when I decided to call out Pollyanna as being Troy because his blather was making me want to throw up. So I wrote, "I'm beginning to think that this is Troy I'm talking to, and if not, he's feeding you information and revealing way more than he should. And if he's willing to reveal information to a perfect stranger on the internet, he'll eventually do the same to you." And then Troy decided to talk as himself. Actually, this is now Troy, and clearly you know me, so let me remind you of a quote that I often say. "Tell the truth, then you don't have to remember all the lies." Mark Twain. Well, look, dude, if you're going to be so bold as to use a Mark Twain quote about being truthful while you're lying, at least get the quote right. It's "tell the truth, then you don't have to remember anything." So I responded, "I think this has been Troy, which demonstrates how controlling you like to be. I know you think you know who this is, but I guarantee you have no idea, but you will soon." And then Pollyanna, her own self, left me a voice message. And I know it might not sound like it, but I did alter her voice so it's not recognizable.
Okay, well, that sounds like a threat. So we'll just leave it at this. This, and I've written everything except the last comment. And you're clearly not a perfect stranger. So it's probably time for us to stop communicating. And we'll just leave it at that. And you can think what you want to think and live your life and do what you want to do for the rest of it.
Now, I don't know how telling someone that pretty soon they'll know who I am is a threat. I mean, had I said, "Pretty soon I'm going to show up at your door and give you the what for and challenge you to a round of fisticuffs," then that could be a threat. But me telling you I'm going to reveal who I am doesn't seem so scary. Especially since you've been begging me through all of the messages to tell you who I am. And even though Pollyanna Troy had just said that she was done with me, she still wasn't. They continued with writing the following. "And the hypocrisy of you accusing me, redacted, of revealing much information that you claim I should, as if anything you think or say matters a hill of beans to me, when you went to the trouble of making a fake profile to reach out to me, a perfect stranger to you, and not only revealed a host of too much information, but showed your true colors of evil intent. Stunning. You win. You're the mastermind of terror and cruelty. Now stop contacting me and harassing me. Best wishes on all the other lives you want to meddle in, become obsessed with, and attempt to run, which proves how controlling you are. P.S. You've nailed several red flags of how an abusive individual operates and are doing a fantastic job of establishing a pattern of abusive behaviors. Keep up the good work. You're an easy one to study and dissect, but I'll still award you a prize for participation. And then Pollyanna Troy put a trophy emoji and then laughed at their own message. So, did you hear that, kids? I am the mastermind of terror and cruelty. So, me telling her that she's dating a convicted pedophile and hangs around with other convicted pedophiles is more terrorizing to her than her actually dating one. And I didn't reveal anything that isn't publicly available. Telling me about the horrible things that have happened to someone that I don't know that aren't publicly available is revealing way too much information. And if Troy is flinging out all of this highly personal information about an ex to someone he doesn't even know on the internet, then his morals are severely lacking. Thankfully, I have some discernment and realize I shouldn't share all of the information that was so freely tossed my way. So, telling someone that they're dating a convicted pedophile is just a woman trying to watch out for another woman and her young child. And I love that even though Pollyanna Troy had written an entire book compared to what I wrote to them and continued to message me, they still had the audacity to write, "Now stop contacting me and harassing me." So this is going to be all for now, but stay close to the channel, kids, because we're going to look at some court documents with Troy's name on them, take a look at some of his buddies, and then maybe talk about some of those videos he made where he tried to get his ex back, but only succeeded in showing everyone his man nipples and how pathetic he is. Seriously, stop posting videos of yourself without a shirt on. Nobody wants to see your little man pancakes, Troy. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be back soon with more true crime. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.